Okay, so welcome Christy, welcome Erica, and Anne. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. You're part of the Plant Strong Sculpt, but in some back and forths, I thought that this would be a really interesting conversation, and I'm so happy to share this with the ladies because it's an area I will not be touching personally. I don't know much about, but I find it fascinating, really fascinating. So I'd like to just start by saying that now that I know how to link, and thank you, now that I know how to link this to YouTube and share this, I might do that for this as well. That way, there is no deadline for you to watch this. You can watch it anytime. So for those who are not able to join live, welcome as well. So we're going to begin. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Rebecca Garland, and I'm founder of Elan Performance, a health and wellness company, and I offer personal coaching, mastery coaching, as well as fitness and nutrition. And this is the Plant Strong Sculpt, and Anne is here with us today. Anne's a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, and she's here to shine some light a little bit on hormones and how she helps women 35 and beyond through perimenopause and menopause with symptoms and goals. I don't know. We'll see where this conversation goes. So Anne's been practicing acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine since 2001. She began her studies of traditional Chinese medicine in Victoria, BC, and continued with a hospital internship in China. In addition to running her own practice for many years, she has also worked as an instructor and clinical supervisor at the Oshio, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Oshio College of Acupuncture and Herbology. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just before we hit record, as we were chatting, you were telling me a little bit about how you got into it. Do you mind just sort of Coles Notes version? Because I always find these processes, how we land in these various areas, really interesting. So how did you get into Chinese medicine?
Well, I had always wanted to be in some type of healthcare. I knew that. And I was originally going to university planning to apply for physiotherapy. But I was struggling with a lot of the math and science-based prerequisites that you had to have. And so I took a break and was looking at other options like massage therapy and just other things that didn't require so much math and physics and things. Mm-hmm. And then I injured myself, and my grandmother suggested I try acupuncture for my injury. And I did. And it really just hooked me in. It was so interesting. And through the process of treating the injury I had at the time, we also got into treating a lot of other stuff about sort of that related to why I had been injured so badly and some of the inflammatory issues in my body and things like that. And I decided that that was what I wanted to study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. As I was sharing, I have a few friends who are doctors of traditional Chinese medicine. I've had acupuncture quite a few times, but I've never really understood it. So I'm kind of going sort of just hoping or trusting that it's doing something, but often I can't feel anything. It's like, I don't know, taking my vitamins, I don't really notice a difference necessarily. But there was one time that was so significant that I'm more fascinated than I've ever been. And that was back in 2016. I was going through a really hard year that year with a lot of grief. And this is a time when the economy was down and business was having tough times, and we were trying to do fertility treatments. But that was the background. The stuff that was really hard was my stepsister had terminal cancer, my stepdad had terminal cancer, and my mom had cancer all at the same time. And I was supporting my mom through this time, and her last chemotherapy was in October, and I went out to help because my stepdad at that time was in a trial. He was very weak himself. And that weekend was when my stepsister passed away. And I came back there was so much grief, there was so much heaviness. And I had been seeing, I think, probably some injuries and pain in my body. And I had been seeing a friend for acupuncture at that time. And I remember, I don't know what she did, I don't know what the points were, but I walked out like it was such a contrasting experience, the way I felt walking into that session and how I walked out of that session. It felt like months and months of heaviness had been lifted. And I couldn't understand it and I couldn't explain it. But I was shocked when I realized that it wasn't just it wasn't just a day or two, like it actually lasted for quite some time. So anyways, I'm totally delighted to have this conversation. Fascinating. And yeah, if there's anybody here who's willing to share, so Crystal's logging on, Erica, Christy, there's no pressure at all, but if you're willing, if you have any stories or what brought you here today, if there's any interest or fascination that you'd like to share, then we can start with that. Otherwise, we'll just start with some questions. We'll give a moment.
At some point, it would be great if we could discuss the shoulder issue that you mentioned. So I'm dealing with that right now, a shoulder injury.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Hi, Crystal. Crystal's unmuted as well.
I know what I was going to ask. Sorry, I was late. I missed what you want us to share about.
Oh, there's
Sorry.
no pressure to share, but I was just saying, if you're really curious about traditional Chinese medicine, if you've had an experience that you really enjoyed, I just opened up the floor for any kind of sharing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or if you're here, if you have any questions that you want to make sure that we touch upon, or if you're just here to see what comes up.
I think I might chime in later. I'm thinking.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so I'll make a note about the injury. And Erica, does Anne know? And do you know anything about Erica's shoulder injury? Did you have?
I don't know if you had an actual diagnosis or anything showed up on scans or anything like that, but.
No, I haven't had any scans done. It was an injury where I fell climbing. So there was an incident that caused it for sure. And, but that said, my shoulders bothered me for years and years. So, so I'm not sure if there's anything relevant that you can say about that, but you did mention sort of shoulders are problematic around this time of life. So I was interested in that.
Mm-hmm. And do you want to start there?
Sure. So I have actually a fairly significant number of women over the age of 35 or 40 that's the original reason why they're coming in, is they have, if not a full frozen shoulder, they're kind of on their way there. And a lot of them, there has been some kind of injury or accident that has led to it. Some of them, they just have had tight shoulder for however long, and it's just getting worse and worse, and they don't know if there was an injury at all. But it's something that we actually see a lot over the age of, especially over the age of 40, but over the age of 35 too. And what I find really interesting is almost everybody does have some kind of history of it's been a problem, but most of these people that I'm treating, they've been to physio, they've been to lots of different things, and they can get it better, but it always comes back, or they never fully regain their range of motion. And so for me, what I originally was treating frozen shoulder kind of more in a traditional sort of soft tissue injury type thing with, you work on specific points for inflammation and releasing different muscles and things. And then I had a woman come into my clinic one time, and we were not making any kind of progress at all. Usually, you see some progress, even if it's temporary, and then they do things and it sort of sets them back and we have to go through it again. And finally, I think it was about our fourth session with no noticeable difference in her pain or inflammation in her shoulder changing at all. And she kind of came in a rush. She had been running late because she had been at her mom's house packing stuff. And so we started talking about that. And through that conversation, what came out was she was actually packing up her mom's house because her mom had just died that month. And so she was dealing with a lot of emotional stuff. And I changed the way we did the treatment that day. And I added in a lot more of a treatment plan and points that was to deal with emotional stagnation in the body and the supporting the adrenal glands and a lot of the hormonal stuff that happens when you have some kind of big emotional event or your body is essentially just really overwhelmed. Because leading up to her mom dying, she was an accountant, and her mom had died at the end of April. So she had been working like crazy and had had a whole bunch of stuff going on. She herself was moving and she was just completely wiped out and exhausted. So I changed the way we did the treatment. And the next week she came in and it was like she slept. She could sleep on her shoulder and not, like, if she rolled over onto that side in the middle of the night, it didn't wake her up at night. There was still pain and still restriction, but it was probably decreased by about 50%. And so ever since then, when I have, especially women coming in who are just really busy, having some hormonal symptoms or a lot of emotional stuff happening in life, I've started treating the shoulder more with some of the treatments I would use for the adrenals and just sort of emotional overwhelm. And I have so much more success with healing and reducing the inflammation in people's shoulders. And I don't know if it's just something to do with women and the way it's almost like we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. But it's not that I never have men come in with shoulder problems, but it's very common in women, and especially over the age of 40. And I have some physicians as clients, and they often ask me if I treat very many shoulder problems, because they have all these women who come in and nothing shows up on the ultrasound, but there's a very clear inflammatory response and they're in a lot of pain and their range of motion is restricted and their physicians don't really know what else to do for them. And so, they actually recommend acupuncture to them a lot of the time. And we have had some really interesting discussions with some of my patients that are doctors about the acupuncture meridians that run through the shoulder and how they're very much related to a lot of emotional stuff and hormonal things. And that's when I started to really look at the pattern. People with these shoulder problems that sort of fit into, whether it's an initial injury or it's just been an ongoing thing for years, but specifically with women over the age of 35 or 40, almost all of them come in and they might be, coming in because they have pain, but they don't sleep. Very frequently, they're waking up sometime between 2 and 4:30 in the morning and maybe going back to sleep, but then they're waking up again and they're fitting into this perimenopause time of our lives where they're all having hot flashes or night sweats. There's a level of anxiety, possibly some depression. And so with the TCM, what we can do is you can treat the injury itself as far as what muscles have tightened up, what muscles are not triggering, where is their injury. We can bring the blood flow there. We can turn off the pain receptors by using acupuncture. You're putting a needle into the body, which essentially is going to trick the body and it's going to send blood flow to the area. It's going to cause your nerves to react. But by targeting what points we're doing, we can also work with whatever's happening in the hormones, or, if your adrenals are shutting down, you're just gone into that adrenal fatigue and everything is so overwhelming and your body is just inflamed and not functioning properly. All of that can be dealt with at the same time. And it just seems to have so much more effect for people. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Erica, do you have any further questions around that before we move on?
No, that's great. Thanks so much. That was very, very informative.
Can you relate to anything?
Oh yes, not sleeping for sure between those hours of the night, and that's a big ongoing one for me as well.
Well, and with the sleep thing, what's interesting is, so in Chinese medicine, we actually have a body clock that relates to all the different meridians and the organs. And if you look at the TCM body clock, the time between 2 a.m. and, or I want to say 3 and 5 a.m. is related to the liver. And the liver meridian in TCM helps regulate our emotions. And then the liver itself is also has a lot to do with clearing hormones out, and very much related to a lot of the menopause stuff and estrogen and progesterone and things like that. So if you have those imbalances in your body, or if there's an imbalance in the acupuncture meridian and the energetic pathways, it's pretty common to get that waking up and then just never really going back to sleep until you hit 5 a.m. and you're like, oh, I might as well get up now.
Or that's when sleep finally arrives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, wonderful. So this, I think, is a really great segue. One of the first questions I wanted to address with you, just to help this conversation make a bit of sense, is for those of us who don't know too much about TCM, because even though I've had it done, and I think I might make an appointment for my back right now, but even though I've had it done, I'm still very, I just want to know more. So can you tell us a little bit about the philosophy of traditional Chinese medicine, a little bit more about, working with the meridians and qi and balancing? Give us a little context for this.
Well, essentially, what we want to do with traditional Chinese medicine is keep everything in the body, I guess you could say, in a state of homeostasis and balanced. There's kind of like the ultimate level of qi and movement of qi in the body. And that's what we work with the meridians to help that stay that way. So qi, it's not something that you can.
How would you describe meridians, like energy pathways, or what is even a meridian?
Well, yeah, they're the pathways in the body that the qi moves around through the body and in and out of the organs and it connects everything in the body. There is a lot of overlap anatomically with the nervous system and nerve pathways, but it's not necessarily like there's all of these little branches where, you have the meridians that I would be putting acupuncture points, the needles into, which are mainly on the arms and the legs, and then some on the back and the stomach area. But from so many of these spots, there's little branches that go inside into the organs and connect with all the internal functioning of the body. So you can, if you had to relate it to something physical, you could kind of relate it to the nerves themselves and the neural pathways in the body, but it's not exactly the same. Like, we're not working with the nerves. It is just this energetic pathway that nobody can really see or feel itself. It's a way for the qi to move through the body. And the qi itself is also something that can't be seen on any kind of x-rays or testing. It can't be measured. I don't want to say it's a theoretical thing, because it is very real in TCM, and I do believe it's real, but it is, in a way, it's kind of an idea of an energetic force in your body. The closest thing that I could say it would relate to would be the hormonal system, because the qi is responsible for all the functions in your body. It comes partially from our food and the air we breathe in. Some of it you're born with, and all of those things combine to produce the chi that your body has. And then the chi keeps your body functioning. You know, it really does function a lot like our hormonal system, where it causes all the organs and the glands to secrete the things they need to secrete, or it moves the blood through the body, and it just allows us to breathe and function as human beings. It allows you to think, you know, all the things.
Every function.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, okay, you're prepared for this one. The three main midlife complaints or symptoms you typically treat women over 35 for. What are you normally seeing in your patients above 35?
So most of them come in for some kind of pain issue initially. And for a lot of people, there is a high level of inflammation in their body. But sort of when they come in for an injury or pain thing, what ends up coming out is definitely insomnia or disturbed sleep. That is probably the number one thing. And then for a lot of women, there's some noticeable changes to the menstrual cycle, and that includes hot flashes and night sweats, maybe irregular periods, or maybe they're just sort of become heavier or more painful, things like that. And then almost the level of exhaustion and physical and mental, and just overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. It's the sandwich years, I think. Hey.
Yeah.
Okay. Any key tips? Because that's everything that you've just mentioned are things that are probably very common and present in our group. So any tips or suggestions you'd have from a TCM standpoint?
So from a TCM standpoint, the main, like there's three kind of main organ and energetic systems that we often end up treating, at least in North America, and North American cultures. It is different in Asia, and they don't have nearly as many menopausal or perimenopausal symptoms as we have here. And I think some of that is because the TCM and the lifestyle stuff is a little bit more integrated. It may be changing now because there's a lot more Western culture there. But I would say you have to start by treating the digestive system, which in TCM is your spleen and your stomach meridian. And so you really want to make sure, that your food and your diet are good, but not just even thinking about not having a lot of processed foods and sugars and eating lots of leafy greens and things, but how eating for the season, eating regularly, and not just eating a lot in between.
Like in between your meals?
Yeah, like just sort of that grazing and snacking. You want to have kind of like the emptying and filling.
Mm.
And then another big thing that I see here is how is food prepared, and with what time of year are you eating it? Because it's so easy now to just get anything any time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And in TCM, we say that the digestive system, the spleen does not like to be cold. And so if you're eating a lot of cold foods, you need to find ways to warm them up, because otherwise it creates what we call dampness in the spleen. And that weighs everything down. Your spleen is what produces chi for your body to function.
I'm
and if it,
laughing because I'm like, my protein shakes.
I know.
I saw your post or somewhere about
And I deal with so many, especially women who are in a rush, and it's like, oh, it's the only way I can get breakfast in. So, I mean, ideally, I would tell them not to eat protein shakes, but honestly, I have them myself too, because it is a way to get it in.
I do drink it with like hot either tea, hot water, or coffee, because I kind of have that in my mind. I'm like, well, goes down cold, but then if I'm drinking it with something warm, it'll kind of warm it up on the inside.
Well, and that will help a bit.
Okay.
But there, sometimes like you can add spices and things like that. So it's not even just necessarily the temperature, but if you look at the energetic flavoring of foods. So adding ginger or cinnamon, I really like to add, because I use a vanilla protein powder a lot. So I actually have a chai spice blend that I'll add to it. And it's whole spices that I just grind up and add. And it's got the cinnamon and a bit of pepper in it and some cardamom and things like that, that really do warm the spleen and the stomach up and allow them to do the work. And even if you look at, like say someone that has IBS or digestive problems, most of the time, even in Western medicine, they're told not to eat a lot of raw food because it is harder to digest. It is hard for the stomach and the intestines to digest a lot of raw food. So another thing that I do, because I put in spinach and kale and stuff like that, is at the beginning of the week, I just and it's just for 5 seconds that I steam it, but I steam big pots of greens. And then I do keep them in my fridge and I pull them out and let them kind of warm up on the counter. And I use just slightly cooked greens in there because that changes the energetic nature of the food. So people like to add ice. If you can get away with not adding ice, that will be much easier for your chi and your body. But I understand that we all have these things that we like. And sometimes it's, do I just not have breakfast, or do I eat the bagel, or do I have the protein shake? So looking at how can you sometimes just adapt so that things are warmer.
Yeah. And I also liked your comment about the tropical fruit. I don't even know where I read this. Was this on our Plant Strong Sculpt post, page somewhere? But you said something about tropical fruit. So that unless it's actually really hot out, which is interesting because in my vanilla, when I do the vanilla shake, sometimes I add a little bit of pineapple or mango, and I like the pineapple for the digestive enzymes and the bromelain. But I was like, oh, that's interesting. I really align, or I like the idea of seasonal eating. So if it's winter out and cold. So can you say more about that?
So if you think about where most of the tropical kind of fruits are growing, they're in really hot places, like mango and pineapple and places like that. We're not really going to grow it very successfully anywhere in Canada. And if you look at, so in TCM, every piece of food has a thermal nature to it. So it is either hot or cold or warm, or it can be neutral, but tropical fruits are all cooling for the system. So if you have too much heat in your body, or too much what we call stomach fire, then those foods are cooling. So in tropical countries where people can get overheated, the tropical fruits can be good for them. But here it can be almost a little bit too much, especially if you're having it in the winter. When it's minus 30 out, the last thing you need to do is throw in a bunch of frozen pineapple. But if you really want to, then just defrost it first if it's a frozen fruit, and maybe make it a pineapple and ginger smoothie.
That'd be yummy.
Yeah, just add something to warm it up a bit.
Awesome. I love these tips and ideas. I want to pause before we get into anything more, just, in the realm of nutrition, warming foods, cooling foods, that kind of thing. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, let's keep going.
All right. So yeah, one of the first things I always look at with women is the digestion, because it is where we get so much of our chi and our energy from. And if you don't have your chi, you are not going to be functioning very well. Once we look at balancing that a little bit, then sometimes we will have to look at, most commonly for women, especially in the perimenopause and menopause age, is the liver meridian. And the liver meridian in Chinese medicine is really important because it is what allows for the chi to move through the entire body. it's responsible for the movement of chi, and the liver meridian is also responsible for emotions in a lot of way. Like each organ in TCM has its own emotion, but the liver meridian helps control the chi movement through the body. So if the liver chi gets stagnated, then those emotions start to overwhelm the other pathways. And then, you get anxiety and depression, and can get some pretty wicked PMS when you have liver chi stagnation. Like those weeks where someone says one thing to you and you just like lose it. And then 5 minutes later, you're crying and you don't even know why. We attribute all of that to the liver meridian. So the liver meridian is also really easily stagnated when we're busy and if we're not moving properly. So one of the things that I always recommend is gentle movement to get your liver chi flowing. Trying to take one less thing off your list every day. Just do one less thing every day and see if you can make that a little easier on yourself. And then there's a tea that I will often recommend to people who have a lot of emotional PMS kind of symptoms, or they're having a lot of hot flashes or night sweats with their periods, or the periods themselves are becoming irregular or heavy or painful. And it's one that I took out of one of my clients was doing this diet through. It was like a diet book that she gave me to look at, because I'm always skeptical of those things. But this one wasn't too bad. It was written by a nutritionist who had worked with a Chinese medicine practitioner, and she, as a nutritionist, actually had a lot of understanding of food and the healing behind it. And so there's a tea that she in this book that I have used myself and I recommend to a lot of clients. And it's a liver tonic detoxifying type tea. And often what I'll recommend to people, you could take it anytime in the month, but if you are in that sort of the age where you're still having periods, whether they're regular or not, what I often recommend, because in TCM, we always want to treat the problem before it comes up. So like if a woman is having problems with her period, the ultimate time, I want to treat you when you're ovulating. I don't want to treat you at your period. I mean, I will, and we might still do treatment then, but if we can treat you before, then maybe you're not going to have the problem with the period. So with this tea, that I'll tell you guys what it is, but I usually tell people to try to take it starting on like day 3 or 4 of their period, of like the start of the menstrual cycle. And you drink it for about 10 days up until ovulation, typically is where that will take you. And if if you really want to, you can have it 3 times a day. So you'd have like 3 cups of this tea spread out over the day. And it's really quite simple to make. It consists of limes, dandelion root tea, milk thistle tea, and turmeric. So typically what I have done for myself and told people to do, if they want to do it for the 10 days and have it a couple times a day, is you take about 5 to 7 limes and you just squeeze them into the water, and then you squeeze the juice out, and then you throw the limes in themselves. And then I do about 7 tea bags of dandelion root and 7 of milk thistle. And most of those, like you can buy them at most health stores, will have some kind of those teas if the grocery store doesn't have it. And then I just grate up some turmeric and I bring it all to a boil in about 15 to 18 cups of water. Just so that there's enough to last for, to make a big, huge batch of tea. And once it's come to a boil, I just let it steep for about an hour, and then you strain it all out and throw it in the fridge, and you've got your tea for a couple of days. And all of those ingredients are really good to detoxify the liver and help the liver clear out estrogen, because so many of us are a little bit estrogen dominant. And some of that I think is environmental. There's so many estrogens in our environment. But also just estrogen can be, and progesterone can get so out of whack when you're under a lot of stress. It's also really good for cortisol levels and just your adrenal glands in general. And then the turmeric in there is good for the cortisol, but it also will help with inflammation in the body.
Awesome. If you've heard the hormone session with Dr. T, I don't get my cycle anymore because I'm on the pill, not because I'm through menopause or anything, but I don't get my cycle anymore. But this still sounds really good. Like, would this be helpful for, just like inflammation and just regular kind of hormone balancing, whether or not you suffer from severe?
Yeah, because even if you don't get a cycle anymore, you're probably still having some kind of cycle in your body, and there's still a hormonal cycle in your body.
Absolutely.
And your liver meridian is still going to need that support. So you could just you don't have to start it at a certain day of your cycle. I just recommend that to people when they're having a lot of PMS or problems with their period.
Okay.
But you can drink it anytime.
Okay, great. To go back to, I should have made a note. I was like, I should make a note, but I was writing down other stuff you were saying. I wanted to go back to food for a second. It wasn't seasonal eating. Oh yes, it was seasonal eating. So springtime, we're in spring. So bitters, like bitter greens, arugula, anything like that is really, really great right now for detoxifying and cleansing. This is very, if anyone's interested in seasonal eating, this is the time for that. So I would love actually, if you could speak a little bit more to like eating in spring, because this, as a Plant Strong Sculpt, we have a huge focus on nutrition, but I'm not giving people meal plans. So you have a lot of variety. So if people are interested in seasonal eating, what are some things they could focus on?
Well, the interesting thing so each organ meridian in TCM also has a season associated with it. Okay. And spring is related to the liver. Okay. And this is when our livers often will start to overact. You can get, and the wind starts to pick up, and that can really stir up the chi, and it can cause anxiety and a little bit more stronger insomnia and mood swings and things like that. So the seasonal eating is really great for this kind of stuff, because what is grown seasonally, and especially like a lot of the greens that are out this time of year, it's like some of the kales and bok choy, maybe some of those kind of things that, depending obviously on where you live and where spring actually is, it could be a little bit easier to grow some of those winter and spring greens. And they will really, really support your liver. They're going to detoxify and astringe. So what I will often tell people too, as the weather warms up, that's when you can start looking at transitioning more into, if you want to have salads instead of cooking all your vegetables. Like in winter, you really want to cook the vegetables and keep things warm. Mm-hmm. But this time of year, it's okay to have any time of year, obviously you can have uncooked vegetables and things, but if you want to have a mix of some of your vegetables a little bit more raw, and then some of them just cooked really lightly, that can be a really good way to get into seasonal eating, as well as adding in just, looking around and finding out what can naturally be grown where you live at that time of year. So for most of us, it's mainly greens.
Dandelions,
a lot of
right now.
Dandelions, nettles, and they're all going to be really good for the body in TCM right now, for supporting the stomach, can handle a little bit cooler foods because it's maybe a little bit warmer out. And so you could also, if you want to do some fruit and things like that, you can kind of compare it to some of the stuff that might be available in fall. So more like apples and pears and things, you could start to add some of those in a little bit more, as if you want more raw fruits, because they are they're not like those tropical, really cooling kind of things.
Okay. Great. Okay, so I've written down sort of in terms of the 2 to 3 key tips that you suggest for the variety of symptoms listed earlier. So the supporting the digestive system, the spleen and stomach meridians, and all those tips. The liver meridian. Was there one more that you were going to say?
So the kidney meridian becomes very important with perimenopause and menopause in women. And that's because as we get older, our kidney yin, so we have like every organ has a bit of yin and yang aspect to it. And as you age, the kidney yin becomes a little bit less naturally. And ways that you can support the kidney yin so that it doesn't really drop down. It's just.
And sorry, can you explain what that even means? The kidney yin? I'm familiar with the terms yin and yang, like yin is cooling, I think, and yang's the fire and the energy, but I don't know if that's accurate.
So it's almost like the water part of the kidney.
Okay.
The kidneys, I mean, you can think about it like the kidneys physically actually do process a lot of water and fluids through the body because of their function with the urinary tract system. And so what they do is in TCM, then they moisten the body. And ultimately, when you start to have those night sweats, maybe you're starting to feel like some of your fluids in your body are getting a little bit drier. Some people will have vaginal dryness or dry mouth and throat, and more so at night.
And dry skin.
Yeah. Everything starts to dry out a lot during sort of the menopause years. And that's because your yin, or your moistening aspect of your kidneys, is starting to decline. And so what you can do in order to support your kidneys is you really want to focus on having a good sleep routine. And just like, I don't know, if you have time to do like 5-10 minutes, a little bit of meditation, or just laying there in your bed before you worry about going to sleep and just sort of letting everything go for the day. Trying to find a way to empty your brain out so that you do just hopefully go to sleep. And even better if you stay asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can have lots of, there's foods that will astringe the kidney yin. So the tea I told you about with the limes in it, that actually will also really help your kidney yin. And some of the beans and the grains are really good for kidney yin. So, like we're doing with the Plant Strong, having lots more, hopefully, like if you're eating your beans and your grains, and just making sure they're ones that you're cooking yourself, though, like not grains in the way of eating more bread and things like that, but actually having like brown rice and quinoa and things like that will be really good for your kidneys.
Okay. I love it. I love how we're tying this into what we're already kind of doing, but giving a little bit more reason behind it, or other ways that it could support us.
Yeah. And with TCM, it's really the whole basis of the medicine is ultimately about your lifestyle. And so much of what a TCM doctor will treat you with, like there's herbs and acupuncture that we can do, but there's a lot of lifestyle stuff with it. Giving people dietary things and exercises and things like that are a huge part of the medicine.
Great. Okay. We only have 5 minutes left, and I don't want to open up a can of worms, so I'll just kind of begin to review and wrap up. But before we do, again, I just want to open space for any comments, any questions.
Is that tea, Anne, that you said, can teenagers drink that tea?
Yep.
Perfect.
And guys too. Guys, they might not have a cycle, but they have their own moody cycles.
Yes, they do. Okay.
Yeah, I give it to my daughter sometimes to drink.
Okay. So like when you said drink it for the 10 days, like, is that still what we should do with teenagers? Like my third daughter there has incredible symptoms. Like I never really did. And even going through, I suppose I might be having some, like, I don't know if I'm going through menopause or not. I have zero symptoms, zero. And my period still comes. But the 13-year-old daughter, like it is like demon and monster, and she has pain and the mood swings are incredible. So can she try that for, how you said, do it for the 10 days? And okay.
Definitely.
Okay, perfect.
She might not like it at first, but it's because it's not bad tasting, but it's got a fairly distinct flavor to it that you have to get used to.
Okay.
It sounds very bitter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And when we're PMSing, what we want is sweet, usually. So, but
we don't
it never
like
feels
her
good.
mood.
Hmm?
We don't like her mood. So maybe the least she could do is just taste a little bit of something that doesn't taste great.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't feel good when you're that symptomatic and you're feeling that shitty. So.
But ultimately, if you give it to her before she's PMSing, which is what you want to do, then maybe she'll be more open to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Good point. Good point. Okay. Erica, Christy, any thoughts, comments, questions? No? Okay. And Christy might still be walking bike along the river. So just in terms of a review, so I'm hearing the digestive system really, really important to support. And of course, that's one thing that we're really focusing on with balanced meals as well in the Plant Strong Sculpt. Balancing your meals, whole foods, limiting as much as we can the processed items and the refined items. So returning back to whole foods, the leafy greens, and suggested eating for the season. And then I really like this piece too, the emptying and filling. And that's very, very supportive from almost everybody who's on this program for the goals that you have. Ideally, because we've talked about intermittent fasting in the past, that may work for you, but generally for women, especially women in the age we're at right now, after 35, it's not usually very supportive for our hormones, for healthy, happy hormones. But what is helpful for many of your goals, including your energy, including balancing, leveling of your energy throughout the day, is the intermittent fasting between meals. So the exception here with all the workouts that you're doing to ensure that you're getting your nutritional needs met are the protein shakes. But otherwise, the intermittent fasting that really aligns with Anne's suggestion there of the emptying and filling, which I think is really interesting. The other piece is the spleen doesn't like being cold. So if you can, I'm going to try not as many frozen things in my protein shakes. But also
shake the day before and let it sit on the counter for a little bit.
Yeah, sounds so
even
good.
just like 10 minutes. It warms it up.
Yeah. But I like also your idea of adding like the chai, the ginger, the cinnamon, adding spices to it. Sometimes I do that, but I'm going to work on that and see if I can find something that I like. And I like your idea of steaming the greens prior, and then the tropical fruit. So, being a little bit more seasonal and local with our foods, unless it's really hot. The other was the liver meridian, connected with spring. So that's kind of cool. Allowing the chi to move through the body, and also allowing, it sounds like, flow, like emotional flow as well, especially in the sandwich years where we are really holding and carrying a lot. So the gentle movement, taking things off the to-do list. This really relates so strongly to our hormone session with Dr. T and the different hormonal archetypes. Stress, anxiety, not anxiety, stress and cortisol are huge players on our hormones and how we're feeling. So these are great suggestions for not just just feeling better, but it sounds like in terms of TCM, the liver meridian, and helping our energy flow better. And then finally, the kidney meridian. So I really like this because I'm noticing, especially in Calgary, it's so dry. Victoria is a little bit less dry, but we're in a really dry climate here, and my skin is so dry. I can really feel that I feel like I'm drying out from the inside, from the inside out. So I think this is really interesting, and it's interesting to connect the kidney meridian and the dampness, I guess, of our body to good sleep. So again, that really connects to a lot of what we have already discussed and talked about. So yeah, I love the interconnectedness of it. It's, yeah, fascinating. Mhm. So thank you so much, Anne, for sharing your time and your wisdom, your knowledge, and your expertise. Is there anything that's come up for you, like a final tip, a final thought before we close?
Actually, there's one acupuncture point I'm going to share with you guys that is very easy for everyone to do at home. And it is one of the master points that can be amazing for anything to do with hormones or stress or high cortisol levels, all of that kind of stuff. And it's on the foot, but I'm just going to use my hand to show you because it's a little easier than trying to get my foot up on my desk. So if you imagine that my thumb is my big toe, and what you would want to do is basically feel between the big toe and the next toe, and you just follow your finger up or follow the toes up until you'll hit a point where it feels like the bones are starting to become one, and it's like you've gone past the webbing between the toes. And that is a spot, it's on the liver meridian, and it's called Tai Chong. It's the liver number 3 point, which is really easy to find any like little picture on the internet or, a little YouTube video about how to find it. But you just have to press on that one. Like you can do that every day for the rest of your life, unless you have the most Zen life and have no stress in your life. This one is amazing. We use it for so many things. And if you're worried about not being right on the point, like honestly, your thumb is, I don't even know, 1,000 times bigger than an acupuncture needle. So you're going to be hitting it.
Okay. Okay, great. I like it. I'm going to give that a go. Okay, we're right up on time, just a couple minutes over, and thank you so much. And Erica, Crystal, Christy, thank you for joining us today. For those who are catching the replay later, I hope this is really interesting. And if you have any questions, maybe just underneath where I'm going to post this in our Facebook group, you can post your questions there and we can continue this conversation in our group. So thank you. Thanks, ladies.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
And
Thanks.
thank you so much once again.